Welcome back to College 101. Last time we talked about loans and debt, how they work, and sort of what a typical loan might look like. There were those 4 parts we talked about: principal, rate, term, and amortization that help you determine how much you'll be paying on the loan depending on how much you take out. There was also that really important statistic I shared with you that I wanted you to remember. As a refresher, that was that student loans cost the average person $8.50 per month per $1,000 borrowed for 15 years, assuming a 6% interest rate. That was important because it lets you do some rough, back-of-the-napkin calculations when you're trying to determine how much you might have to pay for college for years and years to come, even once you're done. Today, I want to go into specifics on where these loans might come from, and specifically the source of government loans. These loans typically come from a program called FAFSA, which is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is great because it's a single application that applies no matter where you go to college. The way it works is you fill out some information about your family's income so that they can use a formula to determine what they call your expected family contribution. You also input information about the school you're going to be attending so that they can estimate a total cost per year. They then try and close the gap between your expected family contribution and the total cost through their various different programs. Now, I'm not going to debate how fair it is that whether or not you can get a loan depends on how much money your parents make, because I know plenty of people who, just because their parents make good money, didn't mean they were getting help with school or as much help as FAFSA might have expected them to. However, it's the way the program works right now, and it's more important to learn how it works and learn to work with it than to try and complain about it. So there are 3 main types of federal student aid that come through FAFSA that I want to talk about today. The first one is Pell Grants. Pell Grants are the best option and the most preferable option for student aid from FAFSA. What they are is they're a grant. A grant is a type of student aid or scholarship, or however you want to think of it, that basically means you don't have to pay it back. It's granted to you. That's great because then you don't have to pay it back. There's no loan burden on you. There's no debt associated with the grant. However, grants can be kind of hard to qualify for. In order to qualify for a grant, your family's expected contribution has to be less than $6,000. I don't know exactly the ins and outs of the formula, and maybe I'll dive into that in a future video, but I do know that qualifying for Pell Grants was a pretty hard thing to do for most people that went to my school. There are a few other ways to qualify for Pell Grants. The first is that once you turn 26, FAFSA considers you an independent adult, and you can evaluate based on your own income and probable empty bank account. If you don't want to wait till you're 26, the other way that FAFSA will consider you an independent person is if you get married. At that point, I guess they figure you're your own family unit, and so they need to evaluate you based on your own income rather than your parents'. Again, it's not a perfect system. In fact, it's pretty flawed, I think, in a lot of people's eyes, but it is what we've got to work with right now. Pell Grants are so great, but there is a limit to them. For one thing, you can only qualify for Pell Grants for up to 12 semesters. After that, they cut you off. No more Pell Grants. Pell Grants also aren't available to graduate students, so this is only for undergraduate students. There's also a limit to how much grant you can receive, and for this school year, 2021-2022, that amount is $6,495 for the year. So that's not going to pay your whole tuition bill at a lot of schools, but it is going to make a pretty big chunk out of it, and you don't ever have to worry about paying that back. Alright, break time. Why did the volcano get so angry and erupt? Because it was taken for granted. Because that sounds like grants, and we're talking about grants today. Remember, if you like the video so far and the content I provide, for that joke, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you really just hate these puns with a burning passion, click the notification bell after you subscribe so you can come and let me know on every single video. Now let's get back to it. For most people who don't qualify for Pell Grants, there are other options for student aid. The other option are federal loans, and there are 2 types that I want to distinguish between. I think I might have just made up the word distinguish. The first one is subsidized loans. Subsidized loans are better than unsubsidized loans because a subsidy is when an entity or a person wants to incentivize you to do something, and they help cover the cost of something or make it cheaper. In the case of student loans, the government subsidizes your loan by making you pay 0 interest until you graduate. That may not sound like a big deal, but when we run some numbers here in a little bit, you're going to see how big of a deal that really is. Just to illustrate the point, if you take out a $5,000 loan your freshman year, and every year thereafter for 4 years, when you graduate you'll have $20,000 in loans, no more and no less. Once you graduate, that's when you'll calculate your payment and start paying on them. The other kind of loan that you really want to avoid if you can are unsubsidized loans. Like I said, an unsubsidized loan starts collecting interest from the day you take it out. So if you take out that $5,000 loan on the first day of your freshman year to pay tuition, by the time you start your sophomore year, it will have already collected interest. If we're assuming 6% interest like we did in the last video, that $5,000 loan you took out is going to be $5,300 before you even get to your sophomore year. If you take out another $5,000 for your sophomore year, you now have $10,300 in student loans. If we do this again, it starts to rack up a little more, and a little more, and a little more each year. That $20,000 you borrowed is going to end up being $23,185 before you even started to pay on it. If you go to school for 5 years and borrow $25,000, by the time you graduate, it's going to be $29,876, which is almost 20% more than you borrowed to begin with. Again, this is before you even started to pay on it, and you just barely graduated and hopefully found a job in your career field. There is also a limit to how much of these loans you can take out each year. Depending on your expected family contribution and the total cost of your university, the FAFSA formula will figure out how much they want to give you for that year and what ratio of subsidized to unsubsidized loans. But it will be usually somewhere between $5,500 and $12,500 in total loans. If the cost of school is still too much, there is also a federal program for parents to take out loans for their students who are going to school. These are called Parent Plus loans, but they're going to have an even higher interest rate than your student loans. So now, let's take a look at the total cost of college and put it in reference for today's interest rates. If you were to apply for FAFSA today and get a loan approved, then your interest rate for an undergraduate loan would be 3.73%, which is quite a bit lower than the 6% that I talked about in the video yesterday. That's good news for you. That changes that $8.50 per month to $7.25 per month per $1,000 borrowed. So that's a little bit of a break, but not a whole lot. Let's say that you're getting a graduate degree. Then that your loan is going to be 5.28% interest rate, and if your parents take out a Parent Plus loan for you, the interest rate would be 6.28%, which ends up being $8.60 per month per $1,000 borrowed. If that's still not enough to cover the cost of school, you can get a private student loan, the same as you would get any other loan. The interest rates on these loans will typically be higher, and it really just depends on you and your credit score. If your parents are willing to sign with you, they probably have a little bit better credit history than you. But if you're on your own as an 18-year-old who may have only just gotten a credit card and began making monthly payments, even if you haven't made any mistakes, your credit score isn't going to be super great, and the bank will see you as a risky investment and charge you a higher interest rate because of it. So if you can avoid private student loans, definitely do that. There are some programs I want to mention. I might dive into them in a future video as well if you guys would be interested. But the first one I want to talk about is the GI Bill. The gist of the GI Bill is that if you serve in the military for a minimum amount of time, I believe it's 3 years to get the full benefit, they'll cover your tuition for an in-state school. The other programs I want to talk about are programs that they call income-based repayment. These programs are for people who have student loans that are disproportionate to how much they make, that you're not going to be able to pay them back, even if you have a great job in your chosen career field. Then there are a few options, especially for certain healthcare workers or for teachers. If you go work in an underprivileged community for a certain number of years, depending on the program, and you make minimum payments all throughout, then you'll be able to have the rest of your loans forgiven. I wouldn't always count on these programs if you don't have to, but they are good to know about and have in your back pocket just in case they'll come in handy for you. And lastly, I want you to keep in mind that all the numbers we talked about today are for undergraduate degrees only. Even the average that we talked about of $30,000 in student debt is for undergraduate degrees. For higher degrees like a master's degree, an MBA, a PhD, or professional degrees, the amount of student debt is higher, especially for some of those costly professional degrees like doctors and lawyers. The interest rates for these loans are also higher, and so it's a more expensive investment, but you also might have a greater return on it. These degrees also have lower unemployment rates, so it means you're less likely to be without a job, whether for a few months or for a year or two or more. Life can be unpredictable, as we've all learned due to COVID-19, and it'd be nice to have a profession where you have more flexibility and more employability. Hopefully this gave you some insight into how student loans work so that you can make an informed decision and set proper expectations for how student loans work, where to get them, and how much is out there for you to get. Especially when you look at the cost of college over 4 to 5 years, these loans can rack up, and if you can get the subsidized loans or get Pell Grants, it'll make a world of difference for your future. I would also strongly encourage you to weigh your options carefully when looking at colleges, especially when you're comparing the cost of them versus the benefit of attending. Thanks for watching this episode of College 101 here on the College Guide. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or things you'd still like to hear more about, and I'll do my best to make content that will keep helping you guys as best as I can.